Welcome to War Room Pandemic. President Xi says this virus is a demon, and we cannot allow that demon to hide. A demon came out of Wuhan, China. We started this show back in mid-January. Out of Wuhan, China came a demon in a pandemic and a virus that started a global health crisis, and it led to a contagion that has now spread to the world's capital markets. Welcome to War Room Pandemic, our New York City special report for 77 WABC. Very honored to be part of the WABC family. My colleagues Jack Maxey, who runs the War Room day-to-day, and Jason Miller, who is the host of War Room 2020, or my co-host, now joins me. A historic day on Wall Street, not since 1929, the Great Depression, the horrific week in October, the last week of October 1929, have we seen a meltdown in global capital markets. In New York City, the vibrant, robust New York City, the tri-state area, is the world's headquarters for global capital markets. That is the New York Stock Exchange and all the bond trading that goes on, all the great investment banking houses and banks, world banks that are here. Absolutely incredible. Today, a 12.93% drop in the New York Stock Exchange. We call it Black Monday 2. It's 16 March, the year of our Lord 2020. Historic drop in the NASDAQ, another 12.3% drop. And I think, gentlemen, we're going to get into everything that the tri-state governors are doing. These Governor Phil Murphy, who was a colleague of mine back in the 1980s at Goldman Sachs. Phil Murphy today activated the National Guard, called a kind of a voluntary, I guess, curfew overnight, starting tonight in New Jersey. The tri-state governors have really taken the lead in shutting down restaurants, bars, gyms, theaters, really taking a lead from the federal government. Governor Cuomo, who has, I think, done an extraordinary job so far as an executive, really ahead on leadership, on testing, on getting ahead of what they call this hospital exhaustion, looking ahead about ICU units, writing this amazing op-ed in the New York Times where he calls for the Army Corps of Engineers to actually assist the states in building this out. Just an extraordinary day. But, Jason, I want to turn – we had a press conference at the White House. And the President of the United States, as he was talking, the stock market went down even more. I mean, there's an issue now. Yesterday was a historic day in which the Federal Reserve, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, cut the prime rate by down to zero, between 0 and 0.25% on a Sunday afternoon, then gave a press conference. You had an overnight meltdown in the capital market. Stock market got to a limit down there in a very few minutes, had to basically halt trading on futures as Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, India, every market melted down. London today, as more bad news came about this pandemic from Italy, from France, from Spain, from Germany. And then the president today, it opens up, absolutely implodes, where it starts to stabilize. They have a press conference later in the afternoon after he gets into this tiff with Governor Cuomo, which we're going to get into in a second. And the market bottom fell out in the last 30 minutes of this, dropped down to a historic 12.93. I mean, really a 13% drop. Jack, you've been doing this a long time. I've never seen anything like this in the global capital markets, and this is going to have a major long-term impact. We've essentially lost, I think, 35% of the value of the New York Stock Exchange in under 3 weeks. I calculated back of the envelope. I think it's $9.5 trillion of values. Not the stock market may not come back and all that, and it could be. And one of the things of pandemic, the reason we've been doing this show is to talk about, since January, this convergence of this health crisis coming from this virus, right, globally. Also this economic carnage, really the kind of Main Street, not just the perturbations in the economy, but also the deep structural issues about the supply chain. Also layered on top of that, the financial crisis. And the financial crisis, the last part, had not been that bad until this last 2 or 3 weeks. And now this part of the contagion's almost driving, about social impact as hard as the health crisis.
Yeah, and look, where we've seen very clearly is when President Trump is taking big, bold action, the market responds favorably. When it's a set of recommendations or if there are delays in Capitol Hill and getting some of these things done, or Speaker Pelosi or Chuck Schumer going poo-poo on some of the suggestions he's putting forward, then we see the market take a dive.
But and here's what happens. You have both governor, and this is why it's such an interesting New York City story, a New York State story. You have Governor Cuomo, I think, kind of driving action as an executive. And I understand we have a federal system where the governors have these extraordinary powers, but he's driving the action. President Trump, to a degree, is kind of making recommendations, right? We'll get to this thing about the 15 days. But then you have Schumer today. Schumer comes in with a $750 billion stimulus package across the board. This is something the capital markets were asking for. You could tell last night when the Fed came in on the monetary side, people were looking for Mnuchin or the president or the administration to come in and say, hey, we hear about you getting liquidity for the market, but we have to know how people are going to get a paycheck next Friday. And that requires something going big. Schumer today comes in with a $750 billion package. I'm not saying it's not going to pass, but symbolically it's important because it shows someone else is driving the action.
Yeah, I mean, and again, going back to this, I mean, what the markets want to see is they want to see very bold, determinative action when it comes on the health side. So when we talk about domestic travel restrictions, when it talks about anything that has to be done to keep Americans safe, that's what they're looking for. On the fiscal side, they're looking for a stimulus. They want to know that the airline industry, that the travel industry, that there's going to be money pumped into the economy. That's what the markets are looking for, to know where exactly are we, is the government there? And any hesitation or any delays or any recommendations as opposed to the big, bold action, that's going to be met with a downturn in the market. It's proven out now over the last couple of weeks.
Now, the president came, and I think one of the things that spooked people, he did say, first off, he cleaned up the comment from the other day where he said, we have control of this. He was basically saying, we have control of the team. His point was the coronavirus, at least this aspect of it, he said could be here. The crisis could remain to July, August, or longer. And so that left it kind of open-ended. He also had, and Jack, you'll get to it later, these 15 days to slow the spread, something we've talked about in the show. And as we do these special reports, we try to get you ahead of the curve of what the nomenclature is, what the concepts are, how you think about this, right, about the infection rates and about the mortality rates. One thing is we've talked about from the very first show back in January is to depress the curve. Where he's making recommendations like we recommend you homeschool or we recommend you stay back from daycare. Mayor de Blasio is shutting down the schools, right, which is a massive step here in New York City to actually close the school system. The tri-state governors, Governor Cuomo, New York, Governor Phil Murphy, New Jersey, Governor Ned Lamont in Connecticut, are working in unison as a pact to really kind of say, hey, starting at 8 o'clock tonight, we want these following, we're effectively want all these businesses to close, right? Hey, when I worked at Goldman, the 8 o'clock's the middle of the workday, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, ordering dinner or something like that. Now you can't order out, but they're taking unified collective action. They're not making recommendations. And I think that's where people are saying, hey, these governors, these mayors, the mayor of San Francisco essentially said, starting tomorrow morning, I think it is, shelter in place, kind of a quarantine coming out of San Francisco. So these things are starting to be dramatic at the local level. Now, my question is, do you think the president's got to step into these decisions more? Do you believe that he's making recommendations, but now's the time people are looking for actions and for leadership? This is what this debate he and Cuomo got into.
I think that what's shaking out right now, Steve, is that people are waking up to the reality of what's going on. I think that the president is wise at this point and going forward to take only the advice from his healthcare professionals. We've dumped $1 trillion into this market. I don't think an $800 billion stimulus package from Schumer is going to make a difference.
I totally disagree with that.
Well,
a fiscal $780 billion stimulus package at the level. Remember, the money that you're putting on the monetary side is to kind of make sure that the bond market and to lift up the asset base underneath the trading. The stimulus is actually to make sure somebody can make payroll next week. It's a totally different thing, right? We had earlier in the day in the early show, one of the top venture capitalists said he wants Treasury to actually start buying at $1 trillion levels to support stock prices. But that doesn't make sure that the waiters that are getting laid off this week are going to get paid.
Well, I can say it looks this universal income is starting to make sense at this point, which is quite unfortunate.
Mitt Romney's taking the Yang Gang's thing.
Exactly.
He's $1,000. This is nobody. People's heads are blowing up.
Such a terrible idea. I mean, remember the whole Bush tax rebate where everyone got their $300 check and then
I'm still kind of a Yang Gang guy. Remember, I'm a populist. I'm going to work
That's
this.
not. I mean, that's just like throwing it into. I mean, you may as well just go to 7-Eleven and buy scratch-off
You
tickets.
have to figure out how you have to figure out. Look, so based, and particularly New York City and the tri-state area, so based on the service economy of small entrepreneur companies, of people that hire 8, 10 people. Right now, they're sitting there going, listen, all of these things are closing. How are they supposed to make payroll in these bars? How is Jim supposed to make payroll? How's all this? Okay, we're going to take a commercial break here to pay some bills at 77 WABC. Very honored to be doing the special report today. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Remember, you can become part of the show. We want to hear your voice, your observations, all of it. We're going to come back, and when we come back, we're going to have John Catsimatidis. He's the chairman of Red Apple Group, now the owner of 77 WABC, one of the top businessmen in the area. We're going to ask his opinion, his ideas about how this is playing out, and particularly, and we'll get to this after a segment, this kind of throwdown of two New York City guys, Mayor Andrew Cuomo, Donald J. Trump, kind of having a throwdown between a governor and a president of the United States about the direction of this pandemic and how it's supposed to be sorted out. We're going to return in a moment with John Catsimatidis, chairman of Red Apple Group, on 77 WABC.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to 77 WABC in New York City. This is War Room Pandemic, the New York City special report. We've been doing this show since late January, talking about this pandemic that blew out of Wuhan, China. The reason we started focusing on it, we knew it was going to have a global impact. Now it's affected the world economy. And starting in the last 10 days, the world's capital markets, New York City is the head of the global capital market. And today we had a historic sell-off, almost 3,000 points on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The last 10, 15 days have been every bit as devastating to the global equity markets as the last week of October in 1929 that triggered the Great Depression. We've had I think, $9.5 trillion of value wiped off in the last 17 days. Want to bring now, we're going to get into all of that. We're going to have Jason Trennert later on in the show, one of the top hedge fund strategists, one of the top thinkers on Wall Street is going to be join us in the second half of the show. We're also going to talk more in depth of this throwdown between Governor Cuomo and Donald Trump with Jason Miller, and talk about a little bit about Chuck Schumer put forward today a $750 billion stimulus program for the United States Senate to continue to take up, and they're going to, Mitch McConnell, those guys are going to be arguing about that all week. I now want to introduce John Catsimatidis, chairman of Red Apple Group. John, you're one of the most prominent businessmen in New York, in the New York tri-state area. You know Governor Cuomo very well. You know the president very well. First off, give us your assessment. We're going to get into this whole throwdown that they're having today, but give us your assessment of what kind of job you think Governor Cuomo's been doing.
Well, I think he's trying to do a great job. I mean, he wants to be a future presidential candidate, and he wants to prove that he has the leadership abilities. Now, he's teamed up with two Goldman Sachs guys. A Goldman Sachs guy, the governor of New Jersey, and a Goldman Sachs guy, the governor of Connecticut. So you got, what do you have? We have 40 million people between New Jersey and New York and Connecticut, and they're trying to make a difference. And the American people, it's not about the Fed. When the Fed can't solve the problem, it's scary. And I think President Trump is trying to use the Fed to solve the problem. I think President Trump has been ahead of the curve on many, many parts of this entire situation. I think our country would have been in much worse shape if he didn't, if he wasn't as alert as he has been. But Cuomo is, just wants to make sure that the Democratic Party is being represented. And I think the answer is people need hope. It's not about the Fed. People don't care if it's another half a point or whatever. It's about hope. It's about having a solution, and that my family's not going to get sick. I'm not going to die and leave my children by themselves. That's what it's all about, Steve.
Listen, let's go to Governor Cuomo for a second. He had, I thought, a terrific piece in yesterday's New York Times where he argued, hey, the president called a national emergency on Friday. Where Governor Cuomo said, hey, I need the Army. We're going to have this we have a capacity problem at the hospitals. I have a bed problem, not enough ICUs, not enough ventilators, and I need the Army Corps of Engineers. I can't do this with state resources. The National Guard, these are not big enough. I need the U.S. Army called out, and I need them to immediately start either building MASH units or helping convert old schools or convert certain spaces to get us more capacity at ICU units. He and the president seem to be going back and forth. Who do you think in this regard is right? Is it Governor Cuomo to kind of drive this process, and is the president showing enough leadership?
I think the president is showing leadership. He's got some of the smartest. He's surrounded by some of the smartest doctors around. He is pushing. Well, he pushed the Fed to do what they're doing, but like I said, it's not about the Fed. And he's pushing the pharmaceutical companies. Find me a solution, and I'll get it by. And there's 3 or 4 companies that think they have possible solutions. But people need hope. Now, I had a friend of mine, Larry Soft, I think he's down at St. Bart's or something, called me up about an hour ago, had a terrific idea. We need someplace to put these people. There's 350 ships all over the world, a lot of them within our country, that should be used maybe not in the old days, prison ships, but how about hospital ships? You can contain the people in one area. So, the ship companies need the money. And they're just parking those ships. Why don't we use the ships and contain the people that get sick so you have them all in one spot instead of having them all over the place and take care of them?
Look, you're considered one of the top businessmen in the region. You're in the food business. You're in the retail food business. You, I think, own the Quick Marts, the gas stations. You're also in the oil refining business. What is your assessment today? Larry Kudlow said, "Hey, it looks like we could be getting into a recession." Goldman Sachs came out and said, "I think there's going to be negative 5% growth in the second half." The president even said, "Hey," when they asked him about a recession, said, "Hey, I don't know." As a businessman, when you look out there, you're at the kind of cutting edge with consumers. What do you think?
Steve, I think it goes back to the same thing. People want to think that there's a solution coming in 3 weeks. It happened in 9/11. I was here. And the 9/11 problem was contained in New York and Washington. I think we have to contain the problem, and people have to see blue sky. Blue sky within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
Wow.
Find me a theoretical solution, and I think we'll be okay.
John Catsimatidis is also the host of the John Catsimatidis Show on Sunday mornings on 77 WABC. Sir, thank you very much for joining us today on our New York City special report of War Room Pandemic.
Well, thank you for having me, Steve, and let's hope our country wins again. We always win.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I want to go now to how people get access to the show. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. And when you go to hashtag War Room Pandemic, we want to see your observations, your comments, your analysis, and particularly if you can link and attach us to any news that you have out there. Jack Maxey, Greg Manns, Jason Miller, Stephen K. Bannon, all of us go through that. We really appreciate everything you're doing. Take a short commercial break. When we get back, we're going to detail and go through and analyze the Cuomo-Trump throwdown about the Wuhan virus in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
The pandemic is a demon, but now it has started a contagion, and that contagion has engulfed the world's capital markets, including in New York City, the headquarters of the global capital market. Welcome to War Room Pandemic, our New York City special report on 77 WABC. It is Black Monday 16 March, year of our Lord 2020. We're going to bring on in a second Jason Trennert from strategists, one of the top thinkers on Wall Street. But I want to play first this because I think, Jason, the meltdown after President Trump took the stage, and President Trump's a business guy, somebody that Wall Street has tremendous respect for. The market went from like 18,500 to 29,000 just a couple weeks ago. $9.5 or $10 trillion of value created. That's all melted down. But today, particularly, after the move last night, I'm sure he was caught by surprise when the Fed cut the rates so strongly. Market melted down overnight again today. Then a little bit of calming in the middle of the day, although terribly negative. He takes the stage, lays out his program, and the market collapsed in the last 30 minutes. What is the market looking for, do you think, Jason Miller?
So I think the market's looking for a couple of things. Number one, they want to see consistency and certainty coming from the administration on projections. And look, here's the bottom.
So why is Cuomo being bold? And the president's been bold twice. When he shut down traffic from China, when he quarantined the people on 31st January, bold move. On Friday, and he's rewarded. On Friday, he steps in and says, national emergency. The market responds favorably. Bold move. And then today, not so much.
Well, it's all an expectations game. And that's really what it is. I mean, look, some of the actions when President Trump said no travel to China, or he's going to stop the folks coming in from China, that was viewed as a huge move. The fact that he quarantined Americans for the first time in 50 years, that was a huge move. I think today folks were looking for another huge move, especially when we talk about Seattle. We talk about the outbreak there. When we talk about New Rochelle and the assistance to, obviously, folks in New York City know New Rochelle just up the road.
You have Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey, who calls out the National Guard and puts a quasi-curfew starting tonight, right? It's voluntary, but he wants only essential traffic. You have the tri-state governors, Cuomo, Lamont, and Murphy, coordinating this effort to really shut down gathering places of more than 50, but bars, restaurants, et cetera, right? They're taking pretty dramatic action. Then the president comes out, who's made some of these bold moves, and it's got this 15 days to slow the spread, but it's kind of volunteer, do some homeschooling.
Right, and those were schooling from home, avoiding gathering in groups of more than 10, which again is even smaller than we're seeing in New York and other places.
But it's a request, not a kind of a
it's
demand.
It's a request, right. Recommendations. Avoid discretionary travel. Avoid eating and drinking in bars, restaurants, and food courts. That's a recommendation to avoid it, as opposed to what we're seeing from the tri-state governors who have shut them down.
What about him saying, hey, this could be July or August, or even before we just had John Catsimatidis on that said, hey, I think we need to see a solution in 2 weeks. I think it's either a therapeutic or it's a vaccine or something that gives people blue sky. That's been the kind of driving force around the Trump thinking. Now today the president says July or August or maybe longer.
Right. Here's what we've seen from Dr. Fauci in recent days, this bell curve. When people talk about flattening the curve, that's where you have the peak or the spike, so to speak, in the number of cases, and then the backside when it starts to subside. That's somewhere in that 8 to 10 week range, at least as far as what Dr. Fauci keeps coming back to. Here's where we had some confusion today. The administration put out the 15 days to slow the spread, which are some good recommendations. We're seeing schools around the country close, some as far as a month or 6 weeks. But here in or right across the river of Virginia, they have it's 15 days, or where I live in Virginia. But then we had from the task force out today basically leaked the peak virus, the optimistic peak for the virus will come in a month.
This is the task force.
This is the task force. In a month, we'll have the peak. Pessimistic, that'll be in 3 months, a little further down the road. And then President Trump in the press conference said the guidelines that combat the coronavirus outbreak could last until July or August, if not longer. And so we have several different –
if not longer.
If not longer. And this is where people are looking for that certainty. It's an expectations game. Here's the reality. Our society as we know it, the way that we do the personal interactions, the handshakes, the way that people might go to the garden for a Knicks game, the way that touchscreens have taken over, all these different things, cruise lines, an industry that will permanently be impacted by this coronavirus. Certain aspects of our society are going to change forever because of this virus. People understand that. They're starting to get it, but also, especially if you're in the restaurant industry, if you own a bar, if you work at a bar, you don't have something to go and fall back on here. You can't be like, oh, I'll just move my restaurant. This is impacting everybody.
Jason Trennert, I want to bring you on now. In a historic day on Wall Street, the last 17 days have been worse as far as value shredding than the last week of October of 1929 that led into the rise of Hitler, Mussolini, the Great Depression, World War II, the hyperinflation in Germany, all of it. I want to bring you in now to give us some perspective. By the way, Chuck Schumer has just announced earlier when we came on the show a $750 billion stimulus package. So put it in perspective of what's happened over the last 15 days.
Well, I would say, Steve, you and I talked about this. I think the last time we talked about it, we were talking about the fact that this was a health crisis and not a financial crisis. I think one of the biggest change today that became more of a financial crisis because of what happened in the bond markets, particularly in the commercial paper market, and also high yield and investment grade credit as well. So all those things together, the spreads blew out meaningfully, and that is a pretty good indication that you're close to recession. And that is what's spooked the markets. I'd also say what did not help late in the day, if you were watching it tick for tick, was an announcement by the House that it was, until further notice, not coming back to Washington. The reason why that's a problem is that people understand there's going to have to be another big fiscal stimulus package to bail out some of these industries that have been most negatively impacted by the coronavirus.
I want to go back to, we're going to get in in the next segment about this kind of Governor Cuomo, President Trump throwdown. But where President Trump has stepped forward and done bold leadership, either in the stopping of the flights from China, the quarantine of American citizens, or on Friday with the national emergency, call for the national emergency, it seems to me the market reacts positively to that. But where you have today where the expectations there's going to be some bold moves following on what the tri-state governors did, following on what Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey, did, following on what Governor Cuomo's done. And President Trump, it's a little uncertain when you're up there, you're getting kind of a mixed message. What is the market looking for from President Trump?
The main thing he's looking for now, in my opinion, is a very bold second fiscal stimulus package. The first one that they've talked about deals with more short-term issues, which would be paid leave, which would be unemployment insurance, things along those lines. What they're going to need now are really open up the spigots and provide enough liquidity so that this doesn't become a solvency issue for very large industries. And so you're going to have to either have zero-interest loans, or some people would hate to call it a bailout, but it might need to be a form of a bailout or a grant or something along those lines to make sure that you get through the next 2 or 3 months. What you're essentially trying to do is create a bridge loan that gets you far enough along so that the liquidity issues don't become solvency issues. And that, to me, that is what investors are looking for. And I would argue, and I not to get overly political about this, but I also think the House has to have some leadership here too. Them being on recess this week is not helpful, and frankly, I find it sickening. Given what's happening, it's not exactly a profiles and courage moment here.
So we got you for a few minutes. I want to say we've got. You're saying both whether it's the airline industry, whether it's the hotel industry, whether it's the cruise industry, or the oil patch. You think they're going to be loan guarantees, some sort of guarantees on the debt and equity side to make sure there's not meltdowns in those industries. In addition, what Schumer's talking about is how do the small companies make payroll in the next couple of weeks? Some cash infusion. You had Mitt Romney today. Mitt Romney went full yang gang. He said, "Hey, give everybody $1,000, right, a month." So you're seeing, what do you want to see out of the stimulus more than just saving these industries with some sort of Treasury debt guarantee?
Yeah. Listen, I think, Steve, the problem is it's very hard. I'm the most free market person that you're going to find. I am not a big Keynesian approach, but when things get bad enough, Keynesian economics can actually play a role. When Keynes wrote his famous general theory, government spending as a percentage of GDP might have been 4 or 5%, as opposed to over 20%. It made more sense then. It makes a little less sense now. In a time like this, where you really never had a demand shock like this, where you have the government essentially mandating that people spend less money. It's not quite that, but in a way, that's what they're mandating people do. That creates big problems, and you're going to have to. And my own opinion is the government will make it back relatively quickly. The bolder the moves are, but I think it's really an all of the above solution. Given where long-term interest rates are, it seems to me there's not a lot of risk. There's not a lot of problems with doing this. I've thought for a while that they should have issued a 50-year or 100-year bond. Secretary Mnuchin had talked about that a lot when he came in. If there was a time to do it, this would be the time to do it, where interest rates are this low. You get through this period of time, and you could start to rebuild. It will not be, in my opinion, a long-term fiscal hit to the United States if it's structured in the right way.
Last question before we let you go. I know people out there in the tri-state area, New York City, they look at their 401ks tonight. They look at their net worth tonight. They had this great run, for the Obama years, but really for the Trump years, you've been at 29,000. They're looking at historic sell-offs over the last 15 days. Put it in perspective. Is this as bad? Are we in a situation like the last week of October 1929, where this really led to a depression?
The biggest, so the losses are on a par with that. The thing that's most different than this time versus 29 is that the policies are much better. In 29, you made every mistake, policymakers made every mistake in the book. They tightened monetary policy. They raised taxes. They raised regulations, and there was a trade war. So you went 4 for 4 in terms of tightening. This time around, the Fed's easing, fiscal policy is easing, the trade war is over, and they're talking about easing regulations. So to me, this could be sharp, it could be painful, but the bottom line is it's very unlikely to last very long once some sort of health solution is found, as long as the government is doing what it can right now to stem the tide. So in that regard, I feel it's not like 29 at all, mainly because policy is so positive right now.
Jason Trennert from Strategist, thank you very much, sir. One of the top thinkers on Wall Street, top brains. I want to pivot now to there's so much historic activity is going on. But one of the most interesting things here, we have a governor that has really shown, I think, executive ability. You have a president of the United States that prides himself in the fact that he is action-oriented, and that what is called Trump time means it has to happen yesterday. And you see these two now both praising each other and in conflict with each other. Jason, talk about Cuomo actually had a press conference and dinged the president a little bit, but also said good things about him. But then the president came back on Twitter.
Yeah, let me go and play these couple of clips real quick here. Here's Governor Cuomo from this morning.
One set of rules for the entire nation, and that is the role of the federal government and national leadership, and it is lacking. The federal government should put one position in place and coordinate it with the states.
So that was Governor Cuomo around 11 o'clock this morning. But then in the exact same press conference about 12, 13 minutes later, here's where Governor Cuomo came through and praised President Trump.
The emergency management team has done a very good job of reaching out to labs, getting them on track, getting them coordinated. Our testing numbers are way up, as you'll see. Next week, by the end of this week, we think we're going to be up to about 7,000 tests per day.
So that's Governor Cuomo praising.
And the RNC, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, tweeted out the praise of Governor Cuomo of President Trump.
Yes, they sent that out. So following that, early this afternoon, President Trump tweeted out the following. Because they also had the call with the governors. I believe that was at 11:30. I believe right after Governor Cuomo's remarks. And President Trump tweeted out, just had a very good teleconference with nation's governors, went very well. Cuomo of New York has to, quote, do more, end quote. So that obviously sparked a lot of intrigue and people paying attention to that.
Governor Cuomo had a response to that, did he not? He had a tweet saying, "Do more." You got
said you're president. You're the one that needs to. You're the one that needs to do more. So here's President Trump when he was then asked about it during the press conference this afternoon.
It said that in a tweet that Governor Cuomo should be doing more.
I think he can do more.
What specifically
but I think
should he be doing?
I think he can do more, and it's an area of the country that's very hot right now. I think New Rochelle, and a place I know very well. I grew up right near New Rochelle. I think it's an area that has to be tamped down even more because it's a hotbed. There's no question about it. So I think they can look at doing it. But we're getting along very well. We've had.
getting along very well. This will play out, I think, over the next couple of weeks. Those two have got to work together, don't you think?
They have to, and they've also praised each other quite a bit recently.
I think they have a lot of respect for each other. But two alpha males, but they have a lot of respect for each other.
And we have no other choice. We have to play well together.
77 WABC, War Room Pandemic will return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
It's 16 March, year of our Lord 2020. It's Black Monday 2, a historic meltdown of the world's capital markets led by the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. It's almost traded down 3,000 points a day, about 13%. War Room Pandemic, New York City. Special report, 77 WABC. Also want to thank America's Voice.News, the streaming platform of the Trump Revolution, now Dish 219, and also the John Fredericks Radio Network, our co-producer. Jack Maxey, we started this show in January. It was to focus on this historic event that was happening in China where they literally shut down Hubei province, which is the size of France, 80 million people, and they hard quarantined a city that's 40% bigger than New York City, Wuhan, and they went door to door. And the question since then, as we've seen this now spread, the pandemic itself, layered on top of a global economic problem, layered on top now we have a global financial crisis. The question has always been, will the United States be closer to South Korea or will the United States be closer to Italy? We followed Italy. We had a person on here from Italy, 3 or 4 weeks ago when Italy had 2 people sick, okay? Today they have 20,000 sick and 2,000 dead. They had 389 dead last night. Are we taking the actions? And is it the governors and the Cuomos that are taking the hard actions? The mayor of San Francisco that's essentially putting the city shelter in place and effectively a quarantine. Is it local authorities and individuals like individual entities like the NBA, et cetera, that are making the hard choices and not the federal government to make us closer to South Korea and not to Italy?
Well, I think that we're going to see that it happens differently in different cities, different states, just like it's happening differently in northern Italy than it is in southern Italy, just like it's in Daegu.
And that's the reason Italy turned.
But
that's the reason Italy turned out like it was. It was too much helter skelter. Guys in Lombardy tried to shut down those 12 cities, but people in the south didn't. People in Milan didn't take it as seriously because they had Fashion Week, and then they tried to close part of Fashion Week. It was very hit or miss. Where in Korea it was test. Social distance, social distance, social distance.
But in Korea, they got a handle on it really, really early in that one city, even though I think the initial 1,000 cases all came from that one church. They jumped on it. The problem was in Italy, you had little breakouts in smaller regional towns within Lombardy, and each one of those towns became overwhelmed very quickly. There's also some very good retroviral things that they're doing in South Korea that I hope will follow. So that's the thing I think that'll be the real
Jason,
key.
President Trump is a New York City guy from Queens. He's a tough-nosed businessman, a man of action, where his previous bold actions have been rewarded. Today, you saw a little bit of uncertainty. Where does the Trump administration go from here in taking leadership?
Well, part of this was the environmental and the expectations game, as I said earlier, but I also want to make clear over the past 24, 48 hours, there was a lot of internet speculation, a lot of text messages going around saying there was a national curfew coming. And so people started expecting some kind of big mandatory government action.
And they moved the briefing from 10:30 this morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. People thought they were working on something. There was going to be something big.
Right. And I think it's on 2 things. Number 1, President Trump has to be at the forefront. Number 1, of telling these both Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill, get their acts together, get this damn stimulus bill done. We got to go and help people. We need to have more economic activity coming to help the people who are in need. But then number 3, some big, bold, dramatic action on the containment and the mitigation. We're going to have to shut down some travel to work on
Is Jason Trennert right? The House has got to come back. The Senate's back. They got to come back. He said that really exacerbated the meltdown today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is
she said, you told me the other day, Jack, she said the captains are supposed to be on the bridge, right?
She said the captains of the ship will never leave the city, and she left before the rats ran down the lines.
Okay, we are at hashtag War Room Pandemic. We want you as part of the show. We want to get your clips. We want to get your observations. We want to get your comments and your criticisms. Okay, it's Stephen K. Bannon, Jason Miller, Jack Maxey. 77 WABC in New York City, the capital of the known world. We've been here, War Room Pandemic, the New York City special report. We'll see you tomorrow.